Bailey, who is the gallery director, who asked me would I be interested in doing this curation of the show. And I also want to thank Sue, who is the founder of AHL Foundation. Now, when you hear what AHL means, you're going to say, oh. It means art, humanity, love. Yeah, see, look at everyone's going, oh, how beautiful. And I think that really sums up what they are trying to do as new neighbors in Harlem. They are trying to share their cultural background, which is primarily Korean, with those who have lived here for a long time in Harlem, as well as those who are newcomers to Harlem. So I think it's a very fitting organization to be here at this particular time, just after we've experienced 3 years of COVID. And I think we're still trying to deal with the aftermath of COVID, but I think that is great. So let me introduce to you the artist for this show. To my far right is Louise Pagan, based in the Bronx. We have Shani Choi. She's from Syracuse, New York. We have Francisco Alvarado Juarez, who is a West Harlem artist. And then we have Taiwa Gong, who is based in New Jersey. So we picked regional artists who are of color, BIPOC artists, so therefore they can share their different disciplines. And one of the things I was trying to do with this exhibition when I was viewing artists' works or visiting their studio, I noticed how color was very dominant in all of their works, and in very dramatic ways. And when I think about humanity, at the root of all humanity, it's, about color and love and family and friends. And we need to tie those things together, especially now, after we have experienced the pandemic. So that's why I titled it Root of Color, because at the root of all color is our humanity. So that's how it all came about. So we're going to be talking with everyone to ask their experience about participating in the show, but also their artistic practice and their own personal thoughts on our our state in the world right now. So I'm going to just go back, and this way we're going to ask all of these questions. I had the questions, and then my phone decided it was going to do something else. That's the one thing about technology. You cannot control it at all. So I think, let me see. And, because I just had it. If not, I can wing this. I think I'm going to have to. I've done radio for 4 years, so I've learned how to wing a whole bunch of things. You'd be surprised. So let me just start off by asking everyone, how did they feel about participating in the show? Let me start off with Louise.
How do I feel about participating? Savona, you made it quite easy for me, honestly. I mean, just to share with the audience, we moved into a new studio space in the Bronx with an organization called the X Arts Factory. We moved in August, and it took some time to settle in, August of last year. It took some time to settle in, and then I decided, because the space is so welcoming, to have open studios at least once a month, just for myself. I invited the other artists, because we have about 12 artists within the space as well. My wife also has a space, and putting her on the spot. She's over here. And it's been an amazing experience, because, at least for me, because coming out of the pandemic, we were so sheltered in and we away from each other. So I just wanted to reconnect with folks. And it wasn't even like an open public invitation. It was more of a private invitation for people that have collected my work then I opened it up since they weren't available. And then people just started coming through, and also via appointments only, because I wanted to hold people accountable for coming into the space and to have that one-on-one, and then their appointment is an hour and a half. So you get to hang out with me for an hour and a half. So Savona went to the last one, on the fourth one, and she came to look at the work, and she told me about the open call of the show, and she liked the work, and she was like, apply, and I did that night. At 11 o'clock at night, and it was due at midnight. And she accepted my work, and I was very appreciative because it's the second show since after the pandemic. But no, this is a fabulous space in this fabulous neighborhood as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you. How about you, Shani?
For me, I wanted to having an opportunity to meet people in our foundation, and then I was a different way to meet Savona than Luis, because I was not the artist who are living. I'm not an artist who are living in here to work. So for me, when Savona just called me, I was like, wow, I got it. and then I was a bit afraid because I'm teaching full times in there generally, but luckily I have a spring break. So I was like, okay, this time a chance to be here. And then everything was setting up. Even the projectors are already there, monitors we got just new. Thanks, Gio. And then thanks for that this kind of all of the possibility too. And then thank you for having a show here. So I was able to do without any worries, any more take time to do it. So yeah, that's my experience.
How about you, Francisco?
Thank you. I think that one of the nicest things for me is meeting new people, experiencing new places, and this whole exhibit has been about meeting new artists, meeting the people of the foundation, which is enriching and making my network much larger. And it's been a beautiful experience knowing you, meeting you, and getting to know you all. So thank you.
I'm so pleased meeting the other audience and the other people. Usually our foundation has a lot of Korean visitors. So I was the awardee of the art foundation Visual Arts maybe 2017.
It was 17.
Yeah, it was 17. And then so I saw the art foundation. I've known the art foundation for a long time, and I'm so happy they have this place. And then this experience is kind of actually deeply meeting with the art place with me, my artwork. So I'm so happy also meeting the place with the meeting with the other artists. So yeah, so it's really very valuable to me.
Okay, great. Now, wanted to ask everyone's opinions, and this time you can just jump right in. It doesn't have to be in any particular order. We are in Harlem, a community that is changing. It's evolving. A lot of people don't know. I gave a lot of historical tours in Harlem, talking about its history. Been doing that for the last 7 years. And a lot of people don't realize that this community was built for wealthy people who did estates, including Alexander Hamilton's estate, which is right up the hill, kind of went bankrupt and started building these row houses just like across the street, because we're across the street from Strivers Row, the King houses, and they built these homes for wealthy people who did not come. And so therefore, it was an effort, started with one black gentleman, a real estate developer, who said, why don't you let the new population in? And what he meant was the migration of black people leaving the South, coming north. 6.6 million came from the South north. My grandmother was a part of that migration for World War II, came alone and brought family members one at a time. I'm first generation, born in New York City. And so I'm a part of that history too. So it becomes this community of black people who were born here or came from the South or from the Caribbean who were fleeing hurricanes in the Caribbean. So now it's changing again, where it's becoming more racially mixed, and I'm happy to the fact that we're getting a much more diverse population, those who are of Spanish, Latin descent, Asian descent, just blended families. So it's changing again as a community. But what has not changed are the struggles that artists of color are still experiencing. And so I wanted to ask each of the panelists, you know, what do you feel or how do you deal with being an artist of color in New York City or New York State for Shani's purpose? But how do you feel being an artist of color to this day? And does being here in Harlem in this show matter, and why? So anyone can just jump on in.
Maybe I want to start first.
Go ahead.
This is like a historically very important moment right now to make a lot of the shows and then express as an artist and also as a part of people in color to raise more the art community with the people in colors, and also to try to have a lot of diversity and inclusion with all of people, because historically, generally all of the art in even mass media or in fine art were it was more like Eurocentric, and also it was more like one side than the others. So this is really good timing, because after the pandemic, many people, most of people fear something needs to change too. And then I'm very lucky to having a show in Harlem especially, and then with the older people, this is like a good moment for me to be as a one of the part of also history. So yeah, that's what I wanted to begin with.
Yeah, Harlem is also, just very close to the New Jersey. So I tried to get the studio over here, but at that time I didn't know about the history of Harlem that much. So when I applied something, I got rejected. So because I didn't understand totally about the Harlem, and then I just write the application, and then I didn't connect with why I have to get the the studio in Harlem. So yesterday I talked to those artists and other people from Harlem, and then I much more understand what I mean, and then what I have to think, and then history of the Harlem. So that's very important moment yesterday. Yeah.
I'm really happy that you started off, because it sparked some thoughts in me, because I'm not even going to go there. But anyway, but I know that during the pandemic, we were starting seeing a shift of the artists, and I was doing a lot of research, not only about my own practice, but also was like, how can I take advantage of more opportunity? Because being a working artist, and I had a full-time job before the pandemic, and I got laid off, so I was able to spend a little bit more time on how can I push my career further. And starting to see, I think after the first year, that the state, the city, I think even federal money was being pushed into the economy of making more opportunities for artists to apply to different grants. Of course, the emergency grants because of COVID. Or if you lost, well, I was on unemployment. That unemployment money was real good. To be honest. And then applying to those opportunities and actually getting some, because I feel like before the pandemic, it was so hard,
Yeah.
really difficult, and thankfully I was able to land a grant as a result, and then being a part of any type of opportunities and opening myself up to just, again, inviting people into the space, because I came to the conclusion is like, if I wait for a show to get accepted to apply, and people may never ever see my work.
Gotcha.
So, I have a lot of people on my mailing list, so I'm like, all right, come. Don't, if you can't come this month, come next month. And then thankful, again, grateful that you pulled me into the show and being here in this space and in this area is fantastic, because another community gets to see my work. No, but you started off and it was excellent, because it was like,
Any thoughts, Francisco?
Yes, I have been in the area for almost 30 years, so it's been a long time, and so I have seen a lot of changes, needless to say. I think in the last 5 to 10 years, to Savona a while back, that I'm one of a generation of Latino artists that were instrumental in trying to change the institutional setup of, you basically went to a museum and they said, no, thank you. There is a museum in Harlem, you know. That's where you belong, or whatever, you know. Usually it was very clear, don't bother us, you don't belong here. So opening those doors was not very easy, and so a lot has changed in the process, and more institutions are more inclusive, a lot of work to be done still. But I happen to have been very lucky to have also been an artist in residence at the Studio Museum a long time ago, and in the 80s, the late 80s. So I've been somewhat connected with the area even before I moved to live here. But I was sort of questioning initially coming to live in this area, because the person that found the apartment for me said, oh, don't say no, go see the apartment first. Yeah. And so I was coming from Midtown and I wanted space, good space here. But then I thought, you know, I live near the Hispanic Society, the museum, and I said, nobody comes to see Goya Velasquez is here. Why would they even bother to come and see me? You know, so this is not going to be an easy situation. But I was very smart in having taken the apartment, which has proven to be a lifesaver. And I was right. It was very difficult to get people into this part of Manhattan because most people have a very negative attitude the moment the word Harlem, even though it, for me, that neighborhood is now called Hamilton Heights, which
No, not all of it.
where I am is called Hamilton Heights.
Trust me.
Or Sugar Hill, or whatever they call it, but it's historic. It's historic Harlem, and you can tell that pretty much right away. It's historic Harlem, but in any case, the issues of diversity. We're so much richer for the fact that we're such a blend, especially in New York, and that's not the way it is in a lot of the country. And we have a situation like right now where we're very interesting blend. That is right here, you know. So it's being an artist of color. I think for the most part, in my personal experience, is that you have to work a lot harder to be recognized than an Anglo-Saxon male.
Well, just dovetailing, I have to explain you one thing that you were trying to say. So the reason I said no about the Hamilton Heights thing is because I served for 15 years on the local community board here, and we had been trying, and it still is going on, trying to explain all of that. And so I was one of the strongest voices saying we are in West Harlem. There's an East, there's a Central, and there's a West Harlem. And the whole thing about Hamilton Heights had to do with real estate values. So homeowners near Convent Avenue thought that they could increase their real estate value on their homes if they called it Hamilton Heights. A made-up name. It has no historical value whatsoever. The original name was Harlem Heights.
That is interesting.
And there was the Battle of Harlem Heights, the only battle George Washington won in the New York City campaign in the American Revolution, and where he met Alexander Hamilton on Broadway and 147th Street. Very quickly, because it is a truly funny story, when I discovered, 2000 was the year that there was a historical plaque that marked that occasion that was placed there by the Daughters of the American Revolution. Now, I didn't know who they were. Can you imagine? So I spoke to the park archivist, she told me, and I researched the Daughters of the American Revolution, and I called them up. Now, my name is Savona, which should be pronounced Savona, Italian. My middle name is Bonita, Spanish, Bailey, Irish, McClain, Scottish. Are you getting where I'm going? They are. I was Caucasian. So they invited me to the meeting, which was held on Park Avenue at the Junior Leagues organization. When I got there, now you have to understand this is really dovetail. I had a board member who said to me, Savona, did you get invited by the Daughters of the American Revolution? I said, Okay, this is the truth. So I've learned a lot. So now there's a plaque that has been replaced on 147th Street and Broadway, bolted in by the City Parks Department. They renamed everything, and at the bottom, they put me at the bottom. At the bottom, they put down the West Harlem Art Fund. But I am proud that I helped replace that plaque. Savona, where Washington and Hamilton met for the Battle of Harlem Heights. So it was really Harlem Heights, never Hamilton Heights. And so that's a made-up name to increase property values. But it speaks to what we're talking about. The fact that still in 2023, we are still pushing for artists of color to get recognition for their works. So tell me, what have you guys done to try to change the narrative that's still being placed upon artists of color when it comes to your artistic practice?
Yeah, see, I know another story.
I know that was a real funny one.
Are there any movement to change the name of the Hamilton Bridge nowadays? Or is it still going on the same thing?
I went through a lot for that, but no, there is none. But I still just then push West Harlem because it's hard, because there's a lot of confusion for talking about that, because you have a large Dominican population now that lives between Amsterdam and Broadway, and for many of them, they don't know where they live. If you ask them, where do you live? They'd be like, I don't know. When you say the names, West Harlem doesn't ring. They might say Washington Heights. I'm saying, no, just a little further north, but they don't know. Again, it's about narrative. If you don't know where you are or the history of the place, that too can place an impact. And I say that because Columbia University has taken over quite a bit of West Harlem and Washington Heights. And dealing with your artistic practice, I'm sure you deal with that too, institutions. Bigger institutions can take advantage of you when you don't know enough to fight them back. And that's the same thing with dealing with museums, dealing with art dealers. If you are not in a position to understand how to expand that narrative, it's hard to fight back when people are pushing onto you what they want to put on you. So have you experienced, I'm sure you've all experienced it. Give us an example of that. I know you were speaking, Francisco, about museums. What experience have you had in dealing with museums trying to push onto you their definitions? Because your photography is not traditional. It's not just portraits.
Painting
It's basically
and the colors that I use are also
you're adding
associated with my
elements
practices.
of different found objects and nature,
very
and that's
careful
not what
with,
most people would assume.
How we
A Latino artist
work.
would, focus on.
And then
Even
how to
within
describe
the
so I didn't want to be so
quote-unquote Latino
and also fearful of not being able to
population.
get into that institution that I was applying to.
I remember a curator
and being shied away and
asking me,
being fearful of being
why are
shied
you
away.
doing that?
Can't have that kind of work here because of the stands
A
for
very
what I'm trying to
well-known
present.
Latino
Especially
curator.
in
The
Santeria,
museum in
having such a negative
much
connotation
further than that.
right?
Basically, I was
even within my own family.
doing at that
So
time
that's where I get
work related
now I
to,
have more of a now
to
so
animals
more
as
of a
trophies, and her thing is, why are you doing the images of Latinos, whatever, It's like, I am an artist. I do what I want to do. I am not a commercial artist. I don't have to sell a painting for a sofa to brighten up the living room. So I do whatever I want to do. So I've never had those constraints put on me. So the questions of the museum, it's interesting because they have given me the freedom to explore. So when usually the shows are planned way in advance, 2 more years in advance. So during that time, I'm just working on a project. They don't even know what I'm going to do, and I don't know what I'm going to do until the work is done. Some institutions are more like, show us what you're doing. How's it going? How's it going? But for the most part, that freedom has come with institutions. Getting to those institutions has not been easy. And as I was saying earlier, I'm one of the first generations that pushed the envelope to make sure that the mainstream institutions were not excluding artists of color, very specifically me. So I was not going directly to the stereotype galleries or museums that handle Latino artists. I was going to the ones that did not. And I was always searching for places that were not the ones where all the Latinos were knocking on the door, all the black artists were knocking on the door, because I wanted to expand my visibility and my work and my experience. So pushing that envelope was not easy, and it's not easy. It remains very difficult to this moment.
How do you feel about Taiwan?
Yeah, I really agree with Francisco. Getting in that institution is really hard as an artist, Asian women artists. Especially my name is obviously it shows the Asian, especially Korean maybe. The name. So they don't see my artwork, and then they see my name, and then they decide, oh, maybe an Asian woman artist, maybe something they have a prejudice. So I always fight with that. That's really hard. When you get in the museum, and then maybe I don't know, I'm not sure, but they kind of expect something Asian kind of style or something before. So that's hard. That breaking is very hard for me.
I agree. I hate to be called Orientalist.
Yeah, right. There are a lot of Korean food, but people think bulgogi and something, it's a Korean food, but even me, because I spent 20 years in the United States, and then so in Korea, I'm not a Korean artist. So because I had a different experience with a Korean artist who's living in Korean art. So I don't belong there too. So here, I'm not belong in the mainstream of the arts world. So kind of, I don't belong anywhere. But
No, you do.
right?
You belong here.
Right?
You belong here.
So, but actually, I don't want to belong anywhere. I'm just an individual artist. I don't want to be recognized as an Asian woman artist.
But that's why I'm saying why
Yeah.
you're here, because
Yeah.
here you can just be an artist.
An artist.
That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
You can just be an artist. Because the moment I saw your works, I said yes. Because I like the delicate nature of your work, and the colors are brilliant. And I was just like, she's a sculptor, and this needs to be seen. And immediately I had said yes. So I was, just taken back by your work. But I understand what you're saying, that sometimes in America you feel like you're in between a lot of different places, and you haven't found your footing yet. How about you, Luis? Do you feel that way?
It's interesting because it's interesting that I thought for quite some time that I thought I was the only one thinking about this, but especially with the name, because over time I was wondering, especially with the submissions and trying to get into shows or grants or whatever, mainly shows. I was wondering if my name was affecting it in any way, right? So then, being a marketer, I decided to rebrand myself and take the Luis out and just do L-A, pagan or pagan. Because people tend to
Think that way.
read my name as pagan as
Okay.
well, but it's really pagan. And then taking away the accents out of my names as well, because once you use an accent, they'll associate that with Latino culture. That's one way that I did it. And I also, instead of using my name for my website, I also rebranded with Liquid Life, that art, just to more to associate my process and my style and how I paint. But also just, I don't even know how to call it, but it's life for me can be very liquid as well. So that's why I also associated with that. And then with painting, and the colors that I use are also associated with my spiritual practices, right?
And then clean, neat, tidy, but I'm not. So I was not. So I started cutting all the edges of the prints, my prints, and then I combine them together on the wall, not on the paper.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So that's the starting point.
That's a good start. I
Yeah,
like that.
right? So from there, almost 20 years later, my work is like that.
So you push the boundaries not just as an artist, but technique-wise to say, let's really think, I gotta come from me. Gotcha.
Yeah, so don't be afraid of getting out of the box, and then sometimes your bad parts can be good parts.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's very, very true.
Yeah.
Any other advice? You don't have to. No, sometimes you do need to think. I find that people don't think in America. We don't reflect. We're always rushing. And I always tell people, no, you sometimes need that moment to think and reflect, because that helps you grow as a person. So you don't have to feel like you have to say something right now. That you may want to jump in later when you're thinking about it. But as we're going to start to wrap up a little bit, I just want to say, where would you like to see your practice go? What types of opportunities would you like to experience that you feel would be good for you?
We're gonna have advice.
Okay.
I was just, sometimes my mind races, like, what do I say first?
Okay, go ahead.
What I found helpful is writing.
Yes.
Writing about the work, writing about your practice. Before, when I had a full-time job, I found that very difficult to find time to do that. Now, thankfully, I do have time to do that, and I have done that, and I find it extremely helpful. And having the courage to open up, like you said, to share your story, that's not easy to do. It's really not. Like, to write about my work subjectively, objectively, it's when I start writing and I start thinking about stories and what I was thinking about during that moment, I was creating that piece, that painting, whatever. I'm like, damn it! If I publish this, people are gonna get to know some real personal stuff. So there's that battle that I go through as well. But if people have the courage to do that, and expose themselves in that way, by all means, go for it. I also found it helpful to going back to fundamentals. I started drawing based on my work, looking at my work and just drawing what I see, and also exploring technology, because I got an iPad over the pandemic, and I got one of those little, like, those pencils that you and then and using the iPad to draw my work, I was like, wow, this is really cool. This is kind of fun. And it reminds me how I was drawing in school with the charcoal. So I missed that. It's a little cleaner with the iPad, but it's a lot of fun. So exploring that, and don't be afraid to think outside the box. Explore, go back to fundamentals, and open yourself up, like I have. Because I don't think I'd be sitting here if I didn't open myself up to invite people in. And because once you open yourself up and invite people in, then opportunities present themselves that you wouldn't even think about.
And where would you like to see yourself going with your practice? Is there anything in particular you would like to do?
Go back to big work. I have 2 paintings in storage right now. They're 4 feet by 6 feet. And I have been able to place it anywhere because I don't have that space big enough to place it, but also being able to show it because it's so large.
Gotcha.
So at some point, I like to go back to large work and see where that takes me.
Anyone else? Where would you like to go with your practice?
Art is kind of the art practice, kind of the self-starter. So you go to this work, and then somewhere you go back there. So I want to go back to flat 2-dimensional print.
Okay.
I'm going to go back a moment. I think that when you're looking at artwork, you pretty much know if the artist had its heart, her heart in the work. So be honest and express whatever is coming out of you. Doesn't matter what it is that's coming out, but if it's sincere, it will read as such. And when it's not, it falls flat. So that in that respect, but in terms of the future, I would just be happy to be able to continue to work and to keep on showing my work, and that's already a tall order. It's not easy, and it is what keeps me ticking.
For me, I started from questions that I don't like, and then it brings out some emotions very little. That is a motivation. I start to thinking about why I wanted to have questions about this. It always comes out from that, and I started to build up more like a research practice with them, trying to find it out, because making some experimental media art needs to be reasonable. It can be avant-garde style, but it's not always going to be work like that way. So need a certain reasons and creating questions, not just finding solutions, but reveal the problem is the most things how I can practice it.
I'll open it up if anyone has any questions for the artist.
I wanted to be first almost, it's almost last moment. I'm in academia mostly right now. And then in academia, when I teach students or when I got some of love from other teachers, actually we learn from galleries in locals and a lot more than museums. To get to understand inspirations by art. And so if there are many things happens, more like an artist can make their own story as much as possible. It affects to academia more than the technology part in industrials in fine art area. So I wanted to you guys are also doing some art to try to make it more happens. So people in academia can learn from between the blending with them. So,
I'm sorry, I missed that last part. Make it more what?
Like a blending together, so
Oh.
bring it up, show inspirations like that way, weaving together.
Okay.
Does anyone have a question for any of the artists?
I haven't seen all of the show, and I mean, congratulations, it really is a beautiful one. This is walking out. And I love the fact that you know, the idea of bringing all of them together has to do with color, but of course that would, you know, that include, I mean, that allows for the entire, you know, universe to be included in that premise. But I wanted to ask all of the artists, how does a tradition in your own cultures affect the work that you do, or how are you inspired by the traditional work that is done in your countries, by traditional artists or folk artists?
In my case, I want to ask the question, what kind of Korean thing you see in my artwork? That's my question. Yeah. So I always wonder about that because I don't use any traditional kind of things. But my experience is I raised and then educated in Korea. Of course, all about Korea. But I don't know what is Korean part of my experience really attract people or reflected to my artwork. So I always wonder, the American people, what kind of Korean thing do you see in my work? Yeah. But there's many people, when I have those conversation with the American people just a little bit, and then they see that the form of that honeycomb shape, it's from, they ask me, it's from your, Korean craft or something. But I see that those kind of things in European too. When I was young, but this inspiration. So when I was young, whenever I go to the temple or the big park in Korea, there's a toy I can open it and then to play with that. So of course I got inspired by that, but I found that in European world. Yeah, the culture too. So yeah, that's my question.
I was gonna say, I feel like your use of paper is very Asian themed. I feel like a lot of, I feel like it's like a spiritual thing in the Asian culture, like because it comes from trees or I don't know, I'm not sure. But that's kind of what I feel is your use of paper is very, from what I know, of the culture, very Asian.
That's a good way to think about it, because actually France is being popular about the paper art tradition. But when you see art before you see name or her, I also have a question. Do you feel something can imagine some background, especially or not?
With this, I immediately felt like it was something Asian. Because like I said, I've seen, I feel like there's a lot of, there's almost like a spiritual kind of respect for paper in the Asian culture. And I feel like that shows through in this sculpture. And I feel like, paper is used by a lot of cultures, of course, worldwide. But I feel like when Asian people use it for art, there's a specific reverence to it, and the way it's used as an extension of nature, which is what it's from. I don't know if that's just what
I actually agree with you because of the colors choice. It's very, very culturally difference between the colors difference. Even though artists have more good sensibility of the colors, and also shape too. It's also relations, the measures of relation.
when I started painting in particular, I was aiming at some historical references to mostly Latin American art. And it was very clear because I was doing sometimes portraitures of well-known Latin American artists of the 20th century, and including one piece that I have, which I sort of locked up and decided that I wasn't going to show it anymore, which is a portrait of Frida Kahlo done in 1985, which is before the whole Frida Kahlo thing. And when it became a Frida Kahlo thing, I said, no, this painting doesn't belong in this circus. But then again, after that, I felt that it was just natural. You know, I didn't have to look for anything. It just comes out. It's what it is. You know, it's in there. And I grew up as a little kid in the Caribbean, in a place that's full of color, you know, flowers, nature is exuberant, right? It's all over the place, from the sea to the land. So it's in me. And a gallery dealer, contemporary right now, said, too much color. I can't sell this work. It's too much color. So that's the way it is. It comes out.
Oh, sorry. For me, I thought when I was going to school, I thought I was going to be a portrait artist. I was going to paint portraits for the rest of my life. But after taking my first abstract course, I was like, oh, this is it. This is it. I was like, no. It changed because it was free. Man, I really enjoyed it, and I couldn't get enough of it. And when I started, and this, I wasn't even doing this, but when I started doing pour painting, it's very meditative, and especially being, you know, you're working and being in institutions and structure all the time, and the only structure that I had to fight against with the painting is the edge of the canvas, or the edge of the painting. So I could pick any palette I want, right? I can pick any colors I want, but the only thing that speaks to my culture is picking the colors of the orishas within the Santeria. You know, you look at it subjectively. Yeah, it's an abstract painting. Anyone can see that, but unless you really dive in and ask or read, that's the intent is there. That's where the culture is.
Well, thank you all for staying with us today. I think we had a great time, don't you think?
Yes.
All right.